It was my first time.
The night Elena Moreau looked into the eyes of the man who destroyed her father, she understood that some debts are paid in blood, some in silence, and some in a love so dangerous it could burn her alive. Marco Villaro, the ruthless head of the Villaro crime family, stood across from her in the shadowed back room of her bar, offering protection she never asked for and truths she wasn't ready to hear. Her father died 8 years ago in an underworld execution she was told was business. Now, the man connected to that death wanted something from her, and Elena knew that whatever it was, it would cost her everything she'd built to survive. If you're ready to dive into a story of forbidden desire, dangerous secrets, and a love forged in the ashes of betrayal, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The rain hammered against the windows of Moreau's, turning the glass into rivers of distorted light. Elena stood behind the polished mahogany bar, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, her hands moving in the practiced rhythm of someone who needed the work more than the work needed doing. It was nearly 2 in the morning. The last stragglers had stumbled out 20 minutes ago, leaving behind empty glasses and the residue of conversations she'd learned long ago not to hear. She preferred the quiet. In the silence, she could almost forget that this bar, her bar now, technically, though the weight of inheritance made it feel more like a tomb, sat exactly 3 blocks from territory controlled by the Villaro family. 3 blocks from the empire built on violence, extortion, and the kind of power that turned men into ghosts. 3 blocks from Marco Villaro himself. Elena had never met him. In 8 years of running this place, she'd kept her head down, paid her dues to the neighborhood, and made sure never to ask questions about the men in expensive suits who occasionally drank whiskey in her corner booths. She knew the rules of survival in this part of the city. See nothing, say nothing, and never, ever get involved. But tonight, those rules shattered. The back door opened with a sharp crack of wood against frame. Elena's hand froze on the glass she was drying, her heart lurching into her throat. The bar had 3 entrances, the main door facing the street, a side entrance that led to the kitchen, and the back door that opened into the alley where deliveries arrived, and where, occasionally, men conducted business they didn't want witnessed. That door was supposed to be locked. "We're closed," Elena called out, her voice steadier than she felt. She set down the glass carefully, her fingers sliding toward the baseball bat she kept beneath the register. 8 years in this neighborhood had taught her that fear was dangerous, but being unprepared was fatal. The man who stepped into the light didn't look like he needed to break into closed bars. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that swept the room with the kind of calculated assessment that made Elena's skin prickle. Behind him, 2 more men filed in, both armed, both watching her with the blank professionalism of people who'd done this too many times to count. Elena's fingers closed around the bat. "I said we're closed." She pulled the bat into view, holding it loosely at her side. "Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it here." The first man stopped a few feet from the bar, his gaze settling on her with an intensity that felt physical. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, and carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "Elena Moreau." It wasn't a question. The way he said her name, like he'd been carrying it in his mouth for years, made something cold slide down her spine. "You know who I am?" he continued, tilting his head slightly. "Don't you?" She did. God help her, she did. She'd seen his face in newspapers, caught glimpses of him in cars that prowled these streets, heard his name whispered in the kind of tones usually reserved for natural disasters. Marco Villaro, the man who'd inherited his father's empire at 25 and turned it into something more dangerous, more efficient, more untouchable. The man whose family had ordered her father's execution. Elena's grip tightened on the bat. "Get out of my bar." Marco's expression didn't change. If anything, there was something almost like respect in the way he studied her. This woman half his size, holding a wooden bat like it could stop what was coming. "I'm here to talk," he said quietly. "That's all." "Then make an appointment during business hours." This conversation isn't the kind you have during business hours. Elena's pulse hammered in her ears. She'd spent 8 years avoiding this moment, building walls between herself and the underworld that had swallowed her father whole. She'd changed her last name from her mother's Dubois back to Moreau only after her father's death, a small, private act of defiance and remembrance. She'd taken over this bar, turned it into something clean, something hers. She'd survived by staying invisible. But Marco Villaro standing in her bar meant that invisibility was over. "I have nothing to say to you," Elena said, her voice low and hard. "Your family took everything from me already. So whatever you think you need, whatever guilt brought you here, I don't want it." Something flickered across Marco's face, too quick to read, but it looked almost like pain. "Your father," he said slowly, "didn't die the way you think he did." The words hit her like a fist to the chest. For a moment, Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 8 years of grief and rage and unanswered questions crystallized into a single, sharp point of focus. "Don't!" Her voice cracked. "Don't you dare talk about him." Marco took a step closer. The two men behind him tensed, but he raised a hand, stopping them. "Joseph Moreau was a good man," Marco said, and there was something raw in his voice now, something that sounded almost like regret. "He worked for my father as an accountant. Clean books, clean conscience. When the Castellano family came for our operations, they wanted leverage. They took Joseph because they knew he had access to records that could destroy us." Elena's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She'd known her father worked in finance. She'd known it was connected to dangerous people. But the details had always been kept from her, wrapped in her father's quiet insistence that she focus on school, on her future, on anything but the shadows he moved through. "My father," Marco continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "gave Joseph a choice. Turn over the records and live. Refuse and die. Your father refused." Liar. The word tore out of Elena like a sob. "They executed him. I saw the crime scene photos. I saw what they did to him." "The Castellanos executed him," Marco said quietly. "But not because he refused to talk. Because he did talk. He gave them falsified records, bought us time to move assets, to protect people. He knew it was a death sentence. He did it anyway." The bat slipped from Elena's fingers, clattering against the hardwood floor. "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why would he do that?" Marco's jaw tightened. "Because the Castellanos made it clear. If they didn't get what they wanted from him, they'd come for you. His daughter, 19 years old, studying art history at NYU, completely unaware of the life her father was really living." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Joseph chose his death to guarantee your life." The room spun. Elena grabbed the edge of the bar, her knuckles white. "You're lying," she whispered. But even as she said it, pieces were falling into place. The way her father had insisted she stay on campus that final semester. The way he'd started putting money into a trust she couldn't access until she turned 25. The last phone call, 3 days before he died, when he'd told her he loved her and that everything he'd ever done was to give her a better life than he'd had. "I'm not." Marco's voice was gentle now, almost tender. "And I can prove it." Elena looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time without the shield of anger. What she saw there made her chest ache, grief that mirrored her own, guilt that looked like it had been eating him alive for years. "My father," Marco said slowly, "ordered me to let it happen. Said Joseph's sacrifice was necessary, that we couldn't risk the family for one man." "I was 23. I argued. I begged him to find another way. But in the end," his voice broke. "In the end, I obeyed. I let your father die." Silence crashed over the bar like a wave. Elena stared at this man, this stranger who somehow held pieces of her past she'd thought were buried forever, and felt something inside her crack open. Rage, grief, and underneath it all, a terrible aching need to understand. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice was barely audible. Marco took another step closer, close enough now that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was holding himself back from reaching for her. "Because 8 years ago, I made a promise," he said quietly. to your father, and to myself, that I would keep you safe, that his sacrifice wouldn't be for nothing. Elena laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Safe? You think I've been safe? I've spent 8 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to figure out who I am, to come finish what they started. I've built this entire life on hiding, on being invisible. I know. Marco's interruption was soft but firm. You've been safe because I made sure of it. Every threat, every whisper of your name in the wrong circles, I buried it. The Castellano family is gone now, Elena. Destroyed 3 years ago. But there are always more enemies, more people looking for leverage, and you, his eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. You're still a vulnerability I can't afford to ignore. A vulnerability. Elena's voice shook. That's what I am to you? No. The word came out fierce, almost angry. You're the last good thing your father left in this world. You're the proof that sometimes, in all this darkness, sacrifice actually means something, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Elena's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to throw him out, to go back to the careful invisibility that had kept her alive. But something deeper, something she'd been trying to bury for 8 years, whispered that maybe, finally, she could have answers. Truth, understanding, maybe even justice. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice steadier now. Marco held her gaze. I want you to let me protect you, properly. No more hiding, no more pretending the danger isn't real. There are people who've started asking questions about your father's records, about what he might have hidden before he died. It's only a matter of time before those questions lead to you. And if I say no, something dark crossed his face. Then I'll protect you anyway. But it'll be harder, messier. People will get hurt. Elena's breath caught. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And somehow, that made it worse. She thought about her father, about the man who tucked her in at night and helped her with algebra homework and never, ever let her see the monster he'd become to keep her safe. She thought about the 8 years she'd spent half living, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And she thought about Marco Villaro standing in her bar at 2 a.m, carrying guilt like a second skin, offering her something she'd thought was impossible. Truth. Show me, Elena said quietly. Show me proof that my father died protecting me, and then we'll talk about what happens next. Marco nodded slowly. Tomorrow night. I'll send a car. No. Elena straightened, meeting his eyes with something like defiance. You want me to trust you? Then you come here, alone. No guards, no guns, just you and whatever proof you have. For a long moment, Marco studied her. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth lifted, just barely, but enough that Elena saw it. You're braver than I expected, he said softly. I'm my father's daughter. The words settled between them like a vow. Marco turned to leave, his men falling into step behind him. But at the door he paused, looking back over his shoulder. Elena, your father's last words were about you. He made me swear to tell you something, if you ever found out the truth. Elena's throat closed. What? He said to tell you that he was sorry, that he wished he could have been honest with you from the beginning, and that every choice he made, good or bad, was because he loved you more than his own life. Tears burned in Elena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. Marco's expression softened. Tomorrow night, then. And then he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night like a ghost. Elena stood alone in her empty bar, surrounded by the ghosts of 8 years' worth of questions, and let herself finally break. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena went through the motions, opening the bar, serving customers, pretending everything was normal, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped. Every shadow seemed to hide threats she'd been too blind to see before. By the time evening fell and she flipped the sign to closed, her nerves were wound so tight she felt like she might shatter. 8 o'clock came and went, 9. Elena sat at the bar, a cup of cold coffee in front of her, watching the door. At 9:30, she started to think he wouldn't show. At 9:45, the door opened. Marco Villaro stepped inside and Elena's breath caught. He was alone, just as she'd demanded. No suit tonight, just dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, less untouchable, more human. He carried a leather messenger bag. "You came," Elena said, hating how her voice shook. "I gave you my word." Marco approached slowly, respectfully, stopping on the other side of the bar. "May I?" Elena nodded, watching as he opened the bag and carefully withdrew a thick folder. He set it on the bar between them like an offering. "Everything's in here," he said quietly. "Copies of your father's communications with my father, recorded conversations, the falsified records he created, evidence of the Castellano family's threats against you." He paused. "And your father's final message, recorded the night before he died." Elena's hand trembled as she reached for the folder. He knew. He knew. Marco's voice was gentle. "He went to them willingly, Elena, because it was the only way to keep you safe." She opened the folder with shaking hands. The first document was a transcript of a phone conversation, her father's voice captured in clinical text, discussing accounts and transfers and contingencies. But in the margins, handwritten notes in her father's familiar script. "Ease tuition secured, trust fund transferred, she'll be taken care of." Elena's vision blurred. She flipped through pages of evidence, each one painting a picture of a man who'd walked knowingly toward his death, because it was the only path that led away from his daughter. Bank statements showing money moved into untouchable accounts in her name. Emails detailing threats against the daughter if cooperation wasn't forthcoming. A grainy photograph of her younger self, leaving her dorm building, unaware she was being watched. And at the bottom, a small digital recorder. "I've listened to it," Marco said softly. 100 times, maybe more. Every word is burned into my memory. But you should hear it yourself." Elena's fingers closed around the recorder. For a long moment, she just held it, feeling the weight of her father's last words. Then she pressed play. Static crackled. Then, her father's voice so achingly familiar it felt like a knife to the chest. "If you're hearing this, Elena, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Sorry for the secrets, for the lies, for every moment of your life I let you believe I was someone I wasn't." A pause. The sound of him taking a shaking breath. "I've done terrible things, worked for terrible people, justified it all by telling myself it was to provide for you, to give you opportunities I never had. But the truth is, I was a coward. I thought I could walk in the darkness and keep you in the light. I thought I could have it both ways." Elena's tears fell freely now, splashing onto the bar. "Tomorrow, I'm going to make the only choice I should have made years ago. I'm going to protect you the only way I still can. The Castellanos want information that could destroy the Villaro family, and through them, dozens of other operations, legitimate businesses, hundreds of families. They've made it clear that if I don't cooperate, they'll use you to force my hand." His voice broke. "I can't let that happen, Elena. I can't let them touch you, use you, hurt you because of my mistakes. So I'm giving them what they want, but not what they think. Records that'll lead them in circles, buy time, keep you safe. It'll cost me my life. But sweetheart, you were always worth more than my life." Silence. Then, softer. "Marco Villaro will take care of you. He's young, but he's not his father. There's still something human in him, something decent. I've made him promise to watch over you, to keep you safe. Don't trust him completely, baby girl. Never trust anyone completely in this world. But if you're hearing this, it means he kept his word to give you the truth." Another pause. "Live, Elena. Live the life I couldn't. Be brave. Be honest. Be everything I should have been. And know that every single day of your life has been the greatest gift I ever received. I love you. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry." The recording ended. Elena sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, feeling like her chest had been cracked open and everything inside exposed. Grief and love and rage and gratitude tangled together until she couldn't tell where one emotion ended and another began. Marco said nothing. He simply stood there, bearing witness to her pain, his own face tight with something that looked like shared sorrow. He was wrong, Elena finally whispered. Marco's brow furrowed. About what? About you. She looked up, meeting his eyes through her tears. You kept more than your word. You kept me safe for 8 years. You've carried this guilt, this responsibility, and you didn't have to. You could have forgotten about me the moment he died. No, Marco said quietly. I couldn't have. Because every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the man who let your father die. The man who obeyed orders instead of fighting for what was right. Your father's sacrifice. His voice roughened. It had to mean something. You had to mean something. Elena's breath hitched. The way he was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting not out of duty, but out of need, made her feel exposed and seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I've spent 8 years hating your family, hating the life my father lived. I built everything on distance, on separation from this world. And now you know the truth, Marco finished. And it's messier than you thought. Your father wasn't just a victim, he was complicit, until he chose not to be. I'm not just the enemy, I'm the person he trusted to protect you. Nothing is clean, nothing is simple. Elena laughed shakily. No, it's not. Marco leaned forward slightly, his hands braced against the bar. I meant what I said last night. There are people asking questions, the kind of people who won't stop because your father's dead or because you've stayed out of the game. They think he hid something, some final insurance policy, some record that could still destroy careers, families, lives. Eventually, they'll come for you. And you want to stop them. It wasn't a question. I want to end this, Marco said, his voice firm. Once and for all. Make it clear that you're off limits, that anyone who comes after you answers to me. But I can't do that if you're hiding. I need you visible, protected, claimed. The last word sent a shiver down Elena's spine. Claimed. Marco's eyes darkened. My world doesn't understand subtlety, Elena. They understand power and ownership and consequences. If I want them to leave you alone, they need to know you're mine. I'm not anyone's. The protest came automatically, born of 8 years of independence. I know. Marco's voice softened. That's not what I meant, but in their eyes you need to be. You need to be seen with me, at my side, under my protection in a way that can't be questioned or challenged. Elena's mind raced. What he was suggesting meant stepping fully into the light, into the world she'd spent her entire adult life avoiding. It meant tying herself to him, to his reputation, his empire, his darkness. It meant trusting him. If I do this, she said slowly, I need the truth. All of it. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. If I'm stepping into your world, I need to know exactly what I'm walking into. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All of it. I promise. Elena took a shaking breath. This was insane, dangerous, possibly the worst decision she'd ever make. But looking at Marco Veyero, at this man who'd carried her father's dying wish for 8 years, who'd kept her safe without asking for anything in return, who was offering her truth instead of comfortable lies, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe she'd been hiding long enough. Maybe it was time to step into the light and see what she was really made of. Okay, Elena whispered. Show me your world. Marco's expression shifted, relief and something warmer, something that made her pulse quicken. Tomorrow, he said. There's a charity gala. Major families, legitimate business owners, politicians. I want you there. With me. As what? Your date? As the woman under my protection. Marco's gaze held hers. As someone who matters to me. The confession was quiet, almost thrown away, but Elena heard the weight behind it, felt the truth of it. This wasn't just about duty anymore, and that terrified her more than anything else. The following evening, Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The dress had arrived that afternoon, midnight blue silk that hugged her curves and fell in elegant folds to the floor. Subtle, sophisticated, expensive. The kind of dress that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. A car was waiting downstairs. Marco's car. Elena's hand shook as she fastened a simple diamond pendant, her mother's, one of the few pieces of jewelry she'd kept, around her neck. She looked like she belonged in Marco's world. Polished, put together, protected. She looked like someone's property. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, it made her feel strangely safe. The drive to the gala passed in a blur. The car pulled up to a historic hotel in the heart of downtown, where valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open doors and photographers lurked behind velvet ropes. Elena's stomach twisted, and then Marco was there, opening her door himself, offering his hand. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his eyes tracking over her face like he was memorizing every detail. Elena's breath caught. "I feel like an imposter." "Good." Marco's mouth curved slightly. "That means you're still you." He kept her hand in his as they walked inside, and Elena felt every gaze in the lobby turn toward them, assessing, calculating, wondering who she was and what she meant to the untouchable Marco Villaro. The ballroom was stunning, glittering chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. People in designer gowns and expensive suits mingled with practiced ease, their conversations a careful dance of influence and alliance. Marco guided Elena through the crowd with a hand on the small of her back, introducing her to businessmen and philanthropists and city council members. Each introduction was carefully phrased. "This is Elena Moreau. She's under my personal protection." The message was clear. Touch her and answer to me. And judging by the way people's expressions shifted, surprise giving way to calculation, giving way to careful respect, the message was received. They were at the bar waiting for drinks when a voice cut through the noise. "Marco Villaro, I'd heard you were finally bringing someone to one of these tedious events." Elena turned to see a woman approaching, late 30s, stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than Elena's car, with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Vivian." Marco's voice was polite but cool. "How unexpected." I could say the same." Vivian's gaze slid to Elena, assessing. "And who might this be? You're usually so private about your associations." "Elena Moreau," Marco said, and there was a warning in his tone. "Elena, Vivian Castellano." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Castellano. The family that had killed her father. Vivian's smile sharpened, predatory. "Moreau. That name sounds familiar. Should I know it?" Elena's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I doubt it. I'm not in your circles." And yet here you are, at Marco's side, under his protection. Vivian took a sip of champagne, her eyes glittering. "That's quite the achievement. He's notoriously difficult to impress." "Vivian," Marco's voice was hard now. "Walk away." "Oh, don't be rude, darling. I'm simply making conversation." But Vivian's gaze never left Elena, sharp and cutting. "Though I have to wonder, what makes you so special? What did you do to earn the great Marco Villaro's attention?" Elena felt Marco tense beside her, felt the danger radiating off him like heat. But before he could respond, she spoke. "I survived," Elena said quietly. "That's all." Vivian's expression flickered, just for a moment, something like recognition crossing her face. Then she laughed, bright and false. How delightfully cryptic. "Well, enjoy the party. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." She drifted away, leaving tension crackling in her wake. Marco's hand tightened on Elena's back. "Are you all right?" "She knows," Elena whispered. "Doesn't she? She knows who my father was." "Probably." Marco's jaw was tight. "The Castellano family collapsed after my father destroyed their operations. Vivian is all that's left, clinging to legitimacy, trying to rebuild influence. But she has a long memory. And now she knows I'm connected to you." Elena's hands trembled. "I just painted a target on my back." "No." Marco turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You just made it clear that anyone who comes after you comes through me. That's protection, Elena. That's safety." But as Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the fierce determination there, She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. And that Marco Velaro, this man who promised to keep her safe, might also be the most dangerous thing in her life. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, standing in his arms, surrounded by enemies and allies she couldn't tell apart, Elena felt more alive than she had in 8 years. They stayed at the gala for 2 more hours, navigating conversations and careful politics. Marco never left her side, his presence a constant shield. By the time they left, Elena's feet ached and her mind spun with names and faces and carefully worded threats disguised as pleasantries. In the car, silence stretched between them. "Thank you," Elena finally said, "for tonight, for letting me see your world." Marco glanced at her, something soft in his expression. "And what do you think of it?" "It's exactly as horrible as I imagined." Elena's mouth curved slightly. "And you navigate it like it's second nature." "It is second nature. I was born into this." Marco's voice went quiet. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd been born someone else. Somewhere else." "Would you have been happy?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights blurring past. "I don't know," he finally admitted, "but I think I would have been free." Elena's chest ached. She saw him clearly in that moment, not the feared crime lord, not the man with blood on his hands, but the person trapped inside that role. Young, tired, grieving his own lost possibilities. "My father used to say that we're all prisoners of our choices," Elena said softly, "but that the bravest thing we can do is choose differently, even if it's terrifying." Marco looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Is that what you're doing?" he asked. "Choosing differently?" "I don't know yet." Elena held his gaze. "But I think I'm trying to." The car pulled up to her apartment. Marco walked her to the door, both of them surrounded by the kind of charged silence that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. "I'll have security posted," Marco said. "You won't see them, but they'll be watching. If anything happens—" "I know." Elena's hand was on the doorknob. She should go inside. Put distance between them. Remember that this was business, protection, strategy. But she didn't move. "Elena," Marco's voice was rough. "If this becomes too much, if you want out—" "I don't." The words came out fierce, surprising them both. "I've spent 8 years running from the truth. I'm tired of running." Marco stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "Your father asked me to keep you safe," he said quietly. "He didn't ask me to pull you into my world, to make you a target. If something happened to you because of me, then it would be my choice." Elena caught his hand, holding it against her face. "Not yours. Mine." For a long moment they stood frozen. Two people on the edge of something that could save them or destroy them, neither quite willing to step back. Then Marco leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "I know," Elena breathed. "You should run." "I know." "Elena?" She kissed him. It was soft at first, questioning, giving him a chance to pull away, to remember all the reasons this was impossible. But then Marco made a sound low in his throat, and his arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena's world had tilted on its axis. "I should go inside," she whispered, even as her hands fisted in his shirt. "You should." But Marco didn't let go. Elena forced herself to step back, to create space, to breathe. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." Marco's voice was rough. "And every day after, until this is over. Until this is over." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a countdown. Elena slipped inside her apartment, closing the door between them, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the peephole, she watched Marco stand there for a long moment before finally walking away, his shoulders tight with tension. And for the first time in 8 years, Elena felt something unfurl inside her chest, something dangerous and reckless and utterly terrifying. Hope, The morning after the gala, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains and the disorienting sensation that her entire life had shifted overnight. She lay still for a moment, fingers touching her lips where Marco's kiss still seemed to burn, wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake or the first honest choice in 8 years. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Coffee on your doorstep. Security checked it. M. Elena padded to the door in bare feet and found an insulated cup from the Italian cafe 3 blocks away, the expensive one she never let herself visit. She took a sip, and the rich, perfectly balanced espresso made her close her eyes in appreciation. He'd remembered her mentioning it once, in passing, during one of their conversations at the gala. The attention to detail should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen. Her phone buzzed again. Dinner tonight. My place. We need to talk about next steps. Elena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she was moving too fast, trusting too easily, letting herself fall into something that could only end in disaster. But another part, the part that had kissed him last night, the part that had been numb for 8 years, whispered that maybe disaster was better than the slow death of safety. She typed back, "What time?" The response came immediately. 7. I'll send a car. I can drive myself. A pause. Then, I know you can, but let me do this anyway. Elena set down her phone and leaned against the counter, coffee warming her hands. She thought about her father, about the recording, about his voice saying that Marco Villaro had something decent left in him. She thought about the way Marco had looked at her last night, like she was something precious he was terrified of breaking. And she thought about Vivian Castellano's sharp eyes and sharper smile, recognizing something in Elena's name that made the air between them crackle with old violence. Her phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call from a number she recognized. Her best friend, Sophie, who'd been traveling in Europe for the past month. "Please tell me," Sophie's voice exploded through the speaker, "that the photo I just saw on Instagram is a very convincing Photoshop job and you did not actually attend the Winterbridge Gala on the arm of Marco fucking Villaro." Elena winced. "It's not Photoshop." Oh my God. Oh my God. Elena, what are you doing? Do you have any idea who that man is? I know exactly who he is. Elena moved to her bedroom, starting to get dressed while balancing the phone against her shoulder. It's complicated, Soph. Complicated? He's a crime lord. His family, Elena, they're connected to everything terrible in this city. Money laundering, extortion, probably worse things neither of us wants to think about. And you're just, what? Dating him. I'm not dating him. The protest sounded weak even to her own ears. He's providing protection. From what? Elena hesitated. Sophie knew about her father's death, knew it was connected to organized crime, but she didn't know the details. Elena had kept those details locked away for 8 years, sharing them with no one. But standing in her bedroom, remembering Marco's promise of truth, she found herself tired of secrets. My father didn't just work for dangerous people, Elena said quietly. He died protecting me from them. And Marco, he was there. He knows what happened. He promised my father he'd keep me safe. Silence on the other end of the line, then softer. Jesus, Elena. There are people asking questions again, about my father, about what he knew. Marco thinks I'm in danger. And you believe him? Did she? Elena looked at her reflection in the mirror, at the woman who'd kissed a man she barely knew, who'd stepped into a world of violence and power, who'd decided that truth was worth the risk. Yeah, she said finally. I do. Sophie sighed. Then I'm coming back early. I land tomorrow night, and you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything, over a very large bottle of wine. Deal. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. I've missed you. I've missed you too. And Elena, be careful, please. I know you think you can handle this, but these people, they're not like us. They don't play by normal rules. After they hung up, Elena finished getting dressed and headed to the bar. Saturday mornings were quiet, giving her time to prep for the weekend rush. But when she unlocked the door, she found someone already waiting. A man in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished in an expensive suit, stood near the entrance. He smiled when he saw her. "Miss Moreau, I hope I'm not intruding." Every instinct Elena had developed over 8 years screamed danger. She kept her hand on her keys, ready to run. "We're closed until 11. "I know. I was hoping for a private word." He extended a hand. "My name is Thomas Reeves. I'm an attorney." Elena didn't take the hand. "I don't need a lawyer." "Perhaps not. But your father did, once upon a time. I represented Joseph Moreau in several business matters before his death. I've been trying to reach you for weeks, but you're quite difficult to track down." Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. "My father's been dead for 8 years. Whatever business he had is long settled." "Not quite." Reeves withdrew his hand, unruffled. "Your father left something in my care, documents he wanted you to have, but only under specific circumstances. I believe those circumstances have now been met." "What circumstances?" "That you would make contact with Marco Villaro. That you would, in some capacity, enter the world your father tried so hard to protect you from." Reeves's expression was gentle. "Your appearance at last night's gala was quite public, Miss Moreau. It seems the time has come." Elena's mind raced. Another secret, another layer of her father's hidden life being peeled back. "What kind of documents?" "I can't discuss that here, but I can tell you that your father was a careful man. He knew his work made him vulnerable, and he took steps to ensure you'd have leverage if you ever needed it." Reeves pulled a card from his pocket, offering it to her. "My office, Monday at 10. Come alone, or bring Mr. Villaro if you trust him. That choice is yours." He left before Elena could respond, disappearing into the morning foot traffic. She stood clutching his card, feeling like the ground kept shifting beneath her feet. The bar phone rang. Elena answered without thinking, her voice automatic. "Moreau's." "Elena." Marco's voice, tight with urgency. "Are you all right? My security flagged someone approaching you." She glanced toward the street, suddenly aware of the watchers she couldn't see. "You're having me followed." "I'm having you protected." "There's a difference." A pause. "Who was that man?" Elena looked down at the card in her hand. Trust. That's what this came down to. Whether she could trust Marco with the full truth of what her father had left behind. "A lawyer," she said slowly. "He says my father left documents for me, that I'm supposed to receive them now that I've made contact with you." Marco swore softly. "What kind of documents?" "He wouldn't say. He wants me to come to his office Monday morning." Elena took a breath. "He said I could bring you, if I trust you." The silence stretched, then, "Do you?" It was the same question Sophie had asked, but coming from Marco, it carried different weight. He was asking if she trusted him with whatever final secrets her father had buried, if she was willing to make him not just a protector, but a partner. "I want to," Elena admitted. "But I barely know you, Marco. Everything between us has happened so fast." "Then let's slow down." His voice gentled. "Tonight, dinner, no business, no strategy, just us, getting to know each other. And then you can decide if you want me at that meeting." Something warm unfurled in Elena's chest. "Just us?" "Just us," Marco confirmed. "I promise." After they hung up, Elena tried to focus on work, but her mind kept circling back to the lawyer's visit, to the documents her father had hidden, to the fact that even in death, Joseph Moreau was still trying to protect her. The day passed in a blur of inventory and prep work. By the time 6:30 rolled around, Elena's nerves were wound tight. She closed early, went home to change, and found herself standing in front of her closet feeling like a teenager before prom. This was ridiculous. It was just dinner, just conversation, just the man who'd promised to keep her safe, who'd carried guilt for 8 years, who'd kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. She settled on dark jeans and a soft sweater, casual but put together. Not trying too hard. When the car arrived at 7, Elena took a deep breath and stepped outside. The drive took her away from the familiar streets of her neighborhood, into the part of the city where old money lived in historic brownstones behind wrought iron gates. The car pulled up to one such building, elegant, understated, with warm light glowing in the windows. Marco opened the door himself. He'd changed too, trading his usual suits for jeans and a dark Henley that made him look younger, more approachable. His eyes swept over her, and something in his expression softened. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." Elena stepped inside, and the scent of cooking food made her stomach rumble. "You cook?" "I do." Marco led her through a foyer decorated with careful minimalism, expensive but not showy, into a kitchen that looked professionally equipped but lived in. Pots simmered on the stove, and a cutting board held fresh herbs. "I hope you like Italian. It's the one thing my grandmother taught me before she passed." The admission felt personal, vulnerable. Elena leaned against the counter, watching him move with easy competence through the space. "Your grandmother?" "She never approved of my father's business. Said we'd all pay for the violence we caused, that money built on suffering would never buy happiness." Marco stirred something that smelled incredible. "She died when I was 15. I think about her a lot. What she'd think of the man I became." "What do you think she'd say?" Marco was quiet for a moment. "That I had a choice, that I've always had a choice, and that it's never too late to choose differently." He glanced at her, something raw in his eyes. "Sound familiar?" Elena's breath caught, remembering her own words from last night. "My father used to say something similar." "They would have understood each other, I think, your father and my grandmother." Marco pulled wine from the fridge, poured 2 glasses. "Both of them trying to save people who didn't want to be saved." They ate at a small table by the window overlooking a private garden. The food was perfect. Homemade pasta with a sauce that tasted like summer, fresh bread, a salad with vegetables that must have cost a fortune this time of year. But more than the food, Elena found herself drawn into conversation that flowed easily, naturally. Marco asked about her childhood, and she told him about growing up thinking her father was just an accountant, about lazy Sundays at the park, and him teaching her to ride a bike. He told her about his own childhood, the disconnect between the loving grandfather who took him fishing and the ruthless crime lord who ordered executions over breakfast. "I was 12 the first time I understood what my family really did," Marco said, refilling their wine glasses. "Someone had stolen from one of our operations. My father brought me to the warehouse where they'd taken him, made me watch while they—" He stopped, jaw tight. "He said I needed to understand the cost of betrayal, that mercy was weakness." Elena's hand found his across the table. "You were a child. I was being groomed." Marco's fingers laced through hers. "Every choice was made for me. What schools I'd attend, what I'd study, who I'd associate with. By the time I was old enough to realize I wanted something different, I was already too deep in the life to escape." "Your father, when did he die?" 3 years ago, heart attack." Marco's mouth twisted. "Ironic, really. All the violence, all the enemies, all the danger, and in the end, it was his own body that killed him. I inherited everything at 25. The empire, the responsibilities, the enemies. The guilt." Elena squeezed his hand. "You could have walked away." "Could I?" He looked at her, and the bleakness in his eyes made her chest ache. "I had hundreds of people depending on me for their livelihoods, families who'd worked for the Villaros for generations. Walk away, and what happens to them? Who protects them from the vacuum I'd leave behind?" "So you stayed." "I stayed. But I've been trying to change things, slowly, moving operations legitimate, cutting ties to the worst of the violence. My father built an empire on fear and blood. I want to build something that might actually last without constantly feeding the monster." Elena studied him in the candlelight, seeing the weight he carried in the tension of his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. "That's why you kept your promise to my father. It wasn't just guilt." "No." Marco's thumb traced circles on her palm. "It was hope. That maybe, if I could keep you safe, this one person, this innocent life, it meant I wasn't entirely the monster my father tried to make me." The confession hung between them, honest and painful. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, that careful distance she'd been trying to maintain crumbling. "You're not a monster," she said softly. Monsters don't spend 8 years protecting someone they've never met. Monsters don't carry guilt for choices they were forced to make as children. Marco's eyes searched hers. You barely know me. Then tell me more. Help me know you. So he did. They talked for hours, sharing stories and secrets and pieces of themselves neither had shown anyone else. Marco told her about the legitimate businesses he was building, the community programs he funded anonymously, his dream of eventually dismantling the criminal empire entirely. Elena told him about the bar, about the regular customers who'd become like family, about her own dream of maybe, someday, opening a gallery to showcase local artists. By the time they moved to the living room, wine glasses in hand, it was past midnight. Elena curled into the corner of a leather couch while Marco built a fire in the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, making him look younger, softer. Can I ask you something? Elena said into the comfortable silence. Anything. Last night, when you kissed me, was that part of the protection strategy? Making it look convincing? Marco turned from the fire, his expression serious. He crossed to the couch, sitting close enough that their knees touched. No. That was me forgetting every reason I should keep my distance. That was me being selfish. Elena's breath hitched. Selfish how? Because wanting you is the most dangerous thing I could do. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. You deserve someone clean, someone who doesn't have blood on their hands, who doesn't carry the weight of terrible choices. You deserve normal. What if I don't want normal? The words came out barely a whisper. What if I've had 8 years of safe and normal and half alive and I'm tired of it? Marco's eyes darkened. Elena, you said tonight was about getting to know each other, about deciding if I trust you. She shifted closer, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken under her palm. I trust you, Marco. More than I probably should. More than makes sense. But I do. You shouldn't. But even as he said it, his hand slid into her hair, cradling her head with devastating gentleness. This path, it only gets darker, harder. There are things coming that I can't protect you from without pulling you deeper into my world. Then pull me deeper. Elena held his gaze, letting him see her certainty. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being protected through distance. If there's danger coming, I want to face it with my eyes open. For a long moment, Marco just looked at her. This woman who was supposed to be his responsibility, his penance, his promise kept. But somewhere along the way, she'd become something else entirely. Something he wanted with a fierceness that terrified him. You're going to ruin me, he whispered. Good. Elena pulled him down to her. Maybe we can ruin each other. The kiss was different than the night before. Slower. Deeper. A promise instead of a question. Marco's hand slid around her waist, pulling her closer, and Elena went willingly, drowning in the taste of him, in the heat that built between them like the fire crackling in the hearth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea. Elena's answer was to kiss him again, softer this time. Okay. They didn't make it to the bedroom. Instead, they spent the night on the couch, wrapped around each other, talking and touching and learning the geography of each other's bodies with a tenderness that felt like worship. Marco traced the scar on her shoulder from a childhood bike accident, and she mapped the old knife wound on his ribs with gentle fingers. They shared kisses that ranged from playful to desperate, building heat, but never quite letting it consume them. Because this slow discovery, this choosing each other, moment by moment, felt more intimate than sex could ever be. As dawnlight crept through the windows, Elena lay with her head on Marco's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safe in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Monday, Marco said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. The lawyer. I'll go with you, if you still want me there. Elena lifted her head, meeting his eyes. I want you there. Whatever your father left, it might be dangerous. Information that people would kill to keep buried. I know. Elena settled back against his chest. But I also know I can't keep running from it, from any of this. Marco's arms tightened around her. Then we face it together. The words settled over them like a vow. Outside, the city was waking up. Normal people starting normal days, unaware of the dangerous currents that ran beneath their ordinary lives. But here, in this moment, Elena felt like she'd finally found solid ground. Even if that ground was built on secrets and violence and a love that probably shouldn't exist. Even if the truth waiting in that lawyer's office might shatter everything. For now, she had this. Marco's heartbeat under her ear. His hands gentle in her hair. The choice she'd made to stop hiding and start living. Whatever came next, she'd face it with her eyes open. And she wouldn't face it alone. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Elena woke in Marco's bed, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, his arm heavy and warm across her waist. They'd spent the weekend in a careful bubble, ordering takeout, watching old movies, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with the violence waiting outside. But now reality pressed against the windows like a storm gathering strength. Marco stirred beside her, his eyes opening to find her already awake. Having second thoughts? About 100 of them. Elena traced the line of his jaw, feeling the morning stubble rough under her fingertips. But I'm still going. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. We don't have to do this today. We could wait, gather more information, and give whoever's looking for these documents more time to find them first? Elena shook her head. No. Whatever my father left, I need to see it. They dressed in silence, the weight of what lay ahead settling over them like armor. Marco wore one of his perfectly tailored suits, transforming back into the controlled, dangerous man the world knew. Elena chose a simple black dress and blazer, professional, unremarkable, the kind of outfit that wouldn't draw attention. The car ride to Thomas Reeves' office building downtown was quiet. Marco held her hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin, but his eyes stayed on the streets, constantly scanning. Elena recognized the hypervigilance now, the way he cataloged every car, every pedestrian, every possible threat. I've had my people look into Reeves, Marco said as they pulled up to a sleek glass tower in the financial district. He's clean, as far as we can tell. Practiced corporate law for 30 years before semi-retiring. No obvious connections to organized crime, though he did represent several clients in our circles. Discreetly. My father trusted him. Elena's voice was quiet. That has to mean something. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. The law office was understated elegance. Dark wood, expensive art, the kind of place where secrets were kept as a matter of professional courtesy. A receptionist led them to a conference room where Thomas Reeves waited, the same calm competence he'd shown at the bar radiating from him. Miss Moreau, Mr. Velaro. He stood, shaking their hands. Please, sit. I'm sure you have questions. A few thousand, Elena said, settling into a leather chair. Marco sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Starting with what exactly my father left in your care. Reeves opened a slim briefcase, withdrawing a manila envelope sealed with red wax. Elena's breath caught. She recognized the seal, her father's signet ring, the one he'd worn every day of her childhood, the one that had been returned to her with his personal effects, now sitting in a box in her closet because she couldn't bear to look at it. Your father gave this to me 6 months before his death, Reeves said, sliding the envelope across the table, with very specific instructions. I was to hold it until either you came looking for information about his past, or until you made contact with Marco Velaro in a capacity that suggested you'd entered the world your father tried to protect you from. He paused. Your appearance at the Winterbridge Gala fulfilled the second condition. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. Marco's hand found her knee under the table, steadying her. He also left this. Reeves produced a small digital recorder. A message. He wanted you to hear it before opening the envelope. Elena took the recorder with shaking fingers. This was different from the first recording. That had been about protection, about explaining his sacrifice. This felt heavier, more final. She pressed play. Her father's voice filled the room, and Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. Elena, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, it means you've found your way to Thomas. It means the life I tried to build for you, clean, safe, separate from all of this, wasn't enough to keep you protected, and I'm so sorry for that. A pause. The sound of him gathering himself. The envelope contains evidence. Records I compiled over 15 years working for the Villaro family and their associates. Financial transactions, shell companies, proof of illegal operations spanning decades. It's comprehensive enough to bring down not just the Villaros, but half the organized crime families in the state. Elena's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Marco had gone perfectly still. I created these records as insurance, her father continued. A guarantee that as long as they existed, no one would dare hurt you. Because if anything happened to me or to you, these records were set to automatically transfer to federal prosecutors. Mutually assured destruction. The recorder crackled with static. But I also created them as a choice. For you. If you're hearing this, it means you're in danger again. It means the protection I tried to give you has failed. And now you have to decide what kind of person you want to be. What kind of justice you believe in. Elena could barely breathe. You can use these records, Elena. Go to the FBI, destroy the families that took me from you. Get justice in the only way this broken system understands, through prosecution, prison, the complete dismantling of everything they've built. No one could blame you. No one could say you were wrong. A long silence, then softer. Or you can destroy them. Burn the evidence, let the past stay buried, and find another way forward. A way that doesn't perpetuate the cycle of violence and retribution that's poisoned so many lives. I can't tell you which choice is right, sweetheart. That's not my decision to make anymore. But I trust you. I trust the woman you've become. Whatever you choose, I'm proud of you. The recording ended. Elena sat frozen, the weight of her father's final gift crushing the air from her lungs. Across the table, Thomas Reeves watched with professional calm. Beside her, Marco had released her knee, his hands clenched into fists on his thighs. He gave me similar instructions, Reeves said quietly. If anything happened to either of you before you retrieved this envelope, copies were to be sent to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and several major newspapers. But if you collected it safely, the choice of what to do with the information is entirely yours, Miss Moreau. Elena's hand shook as she broke the wax seal and withdrew the contents. USB drives, printed ledgers, photographs, a roadmap of corruption and violence spanning decades, meticulously documented in her father's precise handwriting. She spread the documents across the table, her vision blurring. Here was proof of money laundering through legitimate businesses. Here were names and dates of executions. Here were connections between crime families and city officials, judges, police captains. Everything you'd need to burn it all down, including Marco. She found his name in the documents, transactions he'd authorized, operations he'd overseen, orders he'd given. Nothing that directly implicated him in murder, but enough to destroy his legitimate businesses, freeze his assets, possibly send him to prison for years. Elena, Marco's voice was rough. Look at me. She couldn't. She kept staring at the evidence of who he really was, what he'd really done, the empire built on suffering that he'd inherited and perpetuated. Elena, please. She finally met his eyes. What she saw there made her chest crack open. Not fear or anger, but resignation. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, for the inevitable revelation that would make her see him the way he saw himself. You knew, she whispered. You knew my father had this. I suspected. Marco's voice was carefully controlled. Joseph Moreau was too smart not to have insurance. I assumed he'd hidden something, somewhere, evidence that would surface if anything happened to you. And you still... Elena's voice broke. You still kept me safe for 8 years, knowing that I might one day use this to destroy you. Yes. Simple. Honest. Thomas Reeves cleared his throat delicately. I'll give you privacy to discuss this. Take all the time you need. The conference room is soundproof, and my next appointment isn't until 3. He stood, moving toward the door. For what it's worth, Miss Moreau, your father believed you would make the right choice, whatever that choice may be. The door closed softly behind him. Silence crashed over the room like a physical force. Elena stared at the evidence spread before her, then at Marco, then back at the documents. Her hands trembled as she picked up a ledger, flipping through pages of her father's careful notations. Say something, Marco said quietly. Yell at me. Tell me I'm a monster. Tell me you're taking all of this straight to the FBI and I'll never see you again. Just say something. I don't know what to say. Elena's voice was barely audible. I knew what you were, what your family did. But seeing it like this, she gestured helplessly at the evidence. It's real. Concrete. There are names here of people who disappeared, families destroyed, and you... She looked at him, and the pain in her eyes made Marco flinch. You were part of it. I was. He didn't look away, didn't try to soften it. Everything in those documents from the past 3 years, that's on me. The money laundering, the protection rackets, the enforcement. I inherited my father's empire and I ran it. I told myself I was making it better, less violent, moving toward legitimacy. But the foundation was still built on suffering. Elena set down the ledger with shaking hands. Why didn't you tell me? When you showed me the evidence about my father, why didn't you tell me this existed? Because I hoped you'd never have to make this choice. Marco's voice went rough. I hoped I could keep you safe enough, far enough from the darkness, that you'd never have to decide whether to destroy me. But I do have to decide. Elena looked at the documents again. Don't I? Because if I don't use this, if I let it stay buried, I'm complicit. I'm choosing to protect criminals, to let the cycle continue. People could get hurt because I chose to protect you instead of doing the right thing. Marco said nothing. What could he say? She was right. Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the windows overlooking the city. 15 floors below, people went about their normal lives, drinking coffee, hailing cabs, completely unaware that in this conference room, a decision was being made that could reshape the entire criminal landscape. My father gave me this choice because he knew I'd understand the complexity, she said, more to herself than to Marco. He knew I'd see that justice isn't always simple, that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. She turned back to face him. If I give this to the FBI, what happens? Marco's jaw tightened. Arrests, trials. The Villaro empire collapses. My legitimate businesses get seized. Hundreds of employees lose their jobs. Other families rush to fill the power vacuum, probably bloodier, more violent families than mine. And me, he met her eyes. Prison, 10 years minimum, probably more. And if I destroy it, then nothing changes. I continue trying to move operations legitimate, but it takes years, maybe decades. People who deserve justice for what my family did to them never get it. And you, his voice softened, you carry the weight of choosing mercy over justice. Elena pressed her palms against the cool glass, closing her eyes. She thought about her father, about his careful documentation of every crime, every victim. He could have gone to the police himself at any time, could have been a hero, brought down the entire corrupt system. But he'd chosen instead to create a failsafe, a choice, a gift for his daughter that was also a burden. There's something else in here, she said suddenly, returning to the table. She'd noticed it earlier but hadn't processed what it meant, a separate folder marked with her name and a date 3 years in the future. She opened it. Inside were more documents, but these were different. Transfer papers, business licenses, deeds. Her father had been systematically moving Villaro assets, legitimate assets, into holding companies that ultimately traced back to a trust in Elena's name. He was stealing from them, Elena breathed, for years. Moving money, real estate, businesses into accounts they couldn't trace. Marco leaned forward, studying the documents with sharp focus. Jesus. Joseph was brilliant. These transactions, they look completely legitimate on the surface, just routine portfolio management. But if you follow the thread... He looked up at Elena, something like awe in his eyes. He embezzled millions, maybe tens of millions, and funneled it all to you. Elena's head spun. Why? Because he knew what you'd do with it. Marco's voice was quiet. If you chose to destroy the families, you'd have resources to rebuild after the collapse. If you chose mercy, you'd have leverage, money to push the transitions legitimate, to buy out operations, to build something clean. Elena sank into her chair, overwhelmed. Her father hadn't just given her evidence, He'd given her power, options, a way forward no matter which choice she made. "I need air," she said abruptly. I can't think in here." Marco stood immediately. "There's a terrace on this floor, private. We can—" "Alone." Elena's voice cracked. "I need to think alone, please." Something flashed across Marco's face, hurt, maybe, or fear, but he nodded. "I'll be right here. Take all the time you need." Elena gathered the documents, shoving them back into the envelope with trembling hands. She found the terrace Marco had mentioned, a small outdoor space with a few chairs and a view of the city stretching to the horizon. The November air was cold enough to bite, but she welcomed it, needed it. She sank into a chair and let herself finally, fully break down. Tears came in harsh, painful sobs. For her father, who'd carried these impossible secrets. For herself, forced to make a choice that had no right answer. For Marco, who'd become something she couldn't have predicted, not just a protector or a promise kept, but someone she cared about, someone she might even love. And love made everything infinitely more complicated. If she didn't know Marco, the choice would be simple. Turn over the evidence, let justice take its course, sleep soundly knowing she'd done the right thing. But she did know him. She'd seen his guilt, his attempts at redemption, his genuine desire to build something better. She'd felt his tenderness, his careful attention, the way he'd kept her safe for 8 years without asking for anything in return. Destroying him would be justice. But would it be right? Elena didn't know how long she sat there, the cold seeping into her bones, before the terrace door opened. She looked up, expecting Marco, but instead found herself facing Vivian Castellano. Every muscle in Elena's body went rigid. "Relax," Vivian said, raising perfectly manicured hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make you an offer." "How did you meet?" "Find you? Please, You're meeting with Thomas Reeves, one of the most discreet lawyers in the city, with Marco Villaro at your side. It doesn't take a genius to figure out you found your father's insurance policy." Vivian smiled, sharp and cold. "The real question is what you plan to do with it." Elena's hand moved toward her phone, but Vivian was faster, producing a small handgun from her purse. "Don't." The word was soft, but absolute. "We're going to have a conversation, and then you're going to make a choice. But I promise you, screaming for Marco will end very badly for both of you." Elena's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay still. "What do you want?" "The same thing you want. Justice for my family." Vivian settled into the chair across from her, the gun resting casually in her lap. "The Villaros destroyed us. Killed my father, my uncles, scattered what was left of our organization to the winds. Marco likes to pretend he's different from his father, that he's somehow more civilized. But he's not. He's just better at hiding the monster." "Your family killed mine," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You abducted my father, tortured him." "We did what was necessary to survive." Vivian's eyes glittered. "And your father made his choice, just like you're about to make yours." She leaned forward, and the motion made the gun shift slightly. "Here's what I know. You have evidence that could destroy the Villaro family. Evidence I've spent 3 years trying to find. And you care about Marco. I saw it at the gala. I see it now in the way you rushed out here to think. You're trying to decide if you can justify protecting him. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me." Vivian's voice went hard. "Because I'm going to make your choice very simple. You can destroy the Villaros. Use that evidence to burn Marco's empire to the ground. If you do, I'll leave you alone. You'll be the hero who brought down organized crime, and I'll disappear into whatever's left of legitimate society. And if I don't," Vivian's smile was pure venom, "then I'll destroy you both. I have resources you can't imagine, Elena. Connections, leverage, people who owe me debts. I'll make sure everyone knows about your father's embezzlement, about the blood money sitting in your trust fund. I'll ensure Marco's attempts at going legitimate fail spectacularly. And then, when you're both weak and vulnerable and desperate, I'll take everything." Elena's mind raced. This was a threat wrapped in an ultimatum, wrapped in the illusion of choice. "You're bluffing," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "If you had the power to destroy us, you would have done it already." "True." Vivian stood, the gun disappearing back into her purse with practiced ease. But I'm patient, and I'm betting that you're not nearly as ruthless as you need to be to survive in this world. You care about Marco. You believe in redemption. Those soft emotions will get you killed. She moved toward the door, then paused. You have until midnight tonight to decide. Use the evidence and walk away clean, or try to protect him and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Choose wisely, Miss Moreau. Then she was gone, leaving Elena alone with her racing heart and the impossible weight of two different threats demanding two different choices. Elena sat frozen for a long moment before finally forcing herself to move. She returned to the conference room where Marco stood at the windows, his posture rigid with tension. He turned when she entered, and whatever he saw in her face made him cross to her immediately. What happened? Elena told him everything. About Vivian's appearance, the gun, the ultimatum. With each word, Marco's expression grew darker, more dangerous. By the time she finished, his hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. She threatened you. His voice was lethal calm. Put a gun on you. Marco, I'm going to kill her. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. I'm going to find her and end this right now. Stop! Elena grabbed his wrist, forcing him to look at her. That's exactly what she wants, for you to react, to prove you're still the monster she says you are. Don't give her that. She threatened you, Marco repeated, and there was something raw in his voice now, something that sounded like fear. I can't. Elena, if anything happened to you because of me, nothing is going to happen to me. Elena's voice was firm. Because we're going to think this through, rationally, without emotion. Without emotion, Marco laughed, harsh and bitter. You're asking me to be rational about someone putting a gun on the woman I... He stopped abruptly. Elena's breath caught. The woman you what? Marco closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, the look in his eyes made Elena's heart stutter. The woman I love, he said quietly. The woman I've loved since the night you stood in your bar holding a baseball bat, like you could take on my entire organization. The woman who's somehow become more important to me than power, than legacy, than my own goddamn life. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Elena's hands came up to frame his face, pulling him down until their foreheads touched. Then trust me. Trust that I can handle this, that we can handle this together. Together, Marco repeated like he was testing the word. You're not leaving. No. Elena's voice was certain. I'm not leaving, but I am making a choice. She pulled back, moving to the table where her father's evidence still lay spread out like an accusation. For a long moment, she just looked at it. Years of careful documentation, proof of crimes and corruption, the ammunition to destroy everything Marco had built. Then she started gathering it up. Every document, every drive, every photograph. Marco watched in silence as she methodically returned everything to the envelope, her movements deliberate and final. What are you doing? He asked quietly. Elena sealed the envelope and held it against her chest. Choosing mercy over justice. Choosing the possibility of redemption over the certainty of revenge. Choosing... She looked at him, letting him see everything she felt. Choosing you. Choosing us, even though it's probably the worst decision I'll ever make. Marco's expression shattered. Elena, you can't. Think about what you're giving up. The justice you deserve. I'm thinking about what I'm gaining. Elena moved to him, pressing the envelope into his hands. This is yours now. All of it. The evidence, the embezzled assets, everything. You're going to use it to transition your operations completely legitimate. No more protection rackets, no more violence, no more darkness. You're going to build something clean. And Vivian? Elena's smile was sharp. We're going to handle Vivian together, but not through violence, through the one thing she doesn't expect, transparency. Marco's eyes widened. You want to give her what she wants. No, I want to make what she wants worthless. Elena's mind was racing now, pieces clicking into place. She wants to use the evidence to destroy you. But what if we destroy it first, publicly? What if we go to the press, admit to the past crimes, announce a complete restructuring of all Villaro operations? I'd lose everything, Marco said slowly. My reputation, my power, possibly my freedom, but you'd control the narrative. You'd choose transparency over being exposed, and Vivian loses her leverage. Elena gripped his arms. It's a risk, a massive risk, but it's also the only way forward that doesn't end in more blood. Marco stared at her like she'd just rewritten every rule he'd ever known. You're insane. Probably. Elena's laugh was shaky. But I'm also right. Aren't I? He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, impossibly, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, genuine and warm and full of something that looked like wonder. You're definitely your father's daughter, he said softly. He would have been so proud of you. Elena felt tears burn her eyes. Help me finish what he started. Help me build something that actually matters. Marco pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Against her hair, he whispered, Together. Together, Elena echoed. And in that moment, standing in a conference room surrounded by evidence of terrible choices and painful pasts, they made a decision that would change everything. Not revenge, not destruction, but transformation. They had 6 hours until Vivian's midnight deadline. 6 hours to dismantle an empire, rewrite a legacy, and somehow survive the fallout. Marco made calls from the conference room while Elena sat across from him, watching the man she'd chosen transform into something she'd never seen before. Not the controlled crime lord, not the tender protector, but a strategist operating at full capacity. His voice was clipped and precise as he contacted lawyers, accountants, business managers. Each conversation was a carefully placed domino, and Elena could see the pattern taking shape even if she didn't understand all the pieces. When he finally set down the phone, his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like exhilaration. I've called an emergency board meeting for 8 tonight. All the key players in my organization, legitimate and otherwise, they're going to be furious. Can you control them? Elena asked. Marco's smile was sharp. We're about to find out. They left Thomas Reeves's office with the envelope secured in Marco's briefcase. The lawyer had returned long enough to witness Elena's decision, his expression carefully neutral, though Elena thought she caught a flicker of approval in his eyes. Your father would be proud, was all Reeves said, and terrified. Good luck, Miss Moreau. The car took them back to Marco's brownstone, where the next 3 hours became a blur of preparation. Marco's study transformed into a war room, laptops open, documents spread across every surface, phones ringing constantly. Elena watched as he methodically dismantled the careful structures his family had built over generations, rerouting assets, dissolving shell companies, preparing the legitimate businesses for complete separation from their criminal foundations. This is going to hurt, Marco said, his eyes never leaving the computer screen. Some of these operations employ hundreds of people. When we sever the illegal revenue streams, there won't be enough legitimate income to sustain them all. People will lose their jobs. Can we use the embezzled funds to create severance packages? Elena moved to stand beside him, studying the spreadsheets. My father didn't steal that money for me to sit on it. Use it to protect the people who will be hurt by this transition. Marco looked at her, something soft and fierce in his expression. You're sure? I'm sure. Elena's voice was steady. Transform the blood money into something clean, something that actually helps people. So that's what they did. For 3 hours, they worked side by side, using her father's carefully hidden assets to create safety nets for employees, to fund legitimate business expansions, to build something that might actually survive without the foundation of violence holding it up. At 7:30, Marco changed into a fresh suit while Elena freshened up in his bathroom, borrowing one of his shirts because she refused to face a room full of criminals in the same clothes she'd worn to receive her father's final gift. The shirt hung loose on her frame, and she'd paired it with her blazer and the same black pants, but somehow it felt like armor. When she emerged, Marco was waiting, and the look in his eyes made heat pool in her stomach. You're wearing my shirt to a meeting with the most dangerous men in the city. Elena straightened her shoulders. Problem? No. His voice was rough, opposite of a problem. But they're going to know exactly what it means, that you're mine, that I'm claiming you publicly. Good. Elena closed the distance between them, adjusting his tie with steady hands. Let them know, let everyone know, I'm done hiding. Marco caught her hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Last chance to walk away. Once we do this, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. Elena held his gaze. I want to go forward, with you. The kiss was brief but devastating, a promise and a vow wrapped into one moment of perfect clarity. Then they pulled apart, gathering their materials, and headed to face the reckoning. The meeting was held in a private room at one of Marco's legitimate holdings, an upscale restaurant that had closed for the evening. Elena counted 12 men waiting when they entered, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. She recognized a few faces from the gala, others from photographs in her father's documentation. These were the captains, the enforcers, the men who'd built their lives on the Velero Empire's foundation. Marco didn't waste time on pleasantries. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on short notice. I'm going to be direct. As of tonight, the Velero family is getting out of the protection business, the extortion business, and any other operation that exists in legal gray areas. We're going completely legitimate. Silence. Then chaos. Are you out of your mind? Marco, we can't just... You're going to tank the entire organization. This is because of her, isn't it? The last comment came from a thick-shouldered man Elena recognized as Vincent Russo, one of Marco's father's oldest associates. His eyes were on Elena, cold and calculating. You bring some woman to one gala and suddenly you're ready to destroy everything your father built? Marco's voice cut through the noise like a blade. My father built an empire on suffering, on fear, on blood, and I'm done perpetuating it. You're done? Vincent stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood. You don't get to be done, Marco. This isn't a job you quit. This is family, legacy. You think you can just walk away? I'm not walking away. Marco's voice was deadly calm. I'm transforming it. The legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the construction companies. They stay. We invest the embezzled assets I've recovered into expanding those operations, into creating enough legitimate revenue to sustain everyone's employment. Embezzled assets. Another man leaned forward. What embezzled assets? Marco's smile was sharp. The ones my accountant, Joseph Moreau, systematically moved out of criminal operations and into clean holdings over 15 years. Tens of millions of dollars that he hid so well, even my father never found them. Every eye in the room turned to Elena. This is his daughter, someone said slowly. The one Castellano killed. The one my father ordered killed, Marco corrected, his voice hard. Because Joseph Moreau refused to betray us, even when it cost him his life. He protected this organization, and in return my father let him die. I've spent 8 years trying to honor the promise I made to keep his daughter safe. Now I'm honoring the legacy he left behind, a chance to build something that doesn't require innocent blood to sustain it. Vincent's laugh was harsh. Noble speech, but it doesn't change reality. You shut down our operations and someone else fills the void, someone worse, more violent. You're not ending crime, Marco. You're just changing who profits from it. Maybe. Marco's acknowledgement seemed to surprise them. But I'm not responsible for what other people choose to do, only what I choose. And I choose to stop. Then you're choosing to be weak. Vincent's hand moved toward his jacket, and Elena's heart seized, but Marco was faster, his own weapon appearing with practiced ease, trained directly at Vincent's chest. Don't! The word was soft but absolute. I'm giving everyone in this room a choice. Stay with me. Help me build something legitimate, and you'll have a future that doesn't end in prison or a grave. Or leave. Take your chances with other families and accept that we're no longer allies. The tension in the room was suffocating. Elena forced herself to breathe evenly, to not show the fear racing through her veins. These men were dangerous, unpredictable. One wrong move, and this entire plan could collapse into violence. And if we leave, Vincent said slowly, his hand moving away from his jacket, what stops us from going to our competitors with everything we know about your operations? Nothing, Marco said simply, except that within the hour, I'm releasing a statement to every major news outlet admitting to my family's past criminal activities and announcing our complete restructure. Every operation we're shutting down, I'm disclosing to federal authorities voluntarily. Every protection scheme, every laundering operation, every connection we had to illegal activity, I'm burning it all down myself. Shocked silence. You're insane, someone whispered. I'm free, Marco corrected. For the first time in my life, I'm making a choice that isn't dictated by fear or obligation or the weight of my father's legacy. You can all think I'm crazy, but you can't say I didn't give you options. Elena watched the men process this, saw the calculation in their eyes. Some looked angry, others confused, a few almost relieved. One of the younger men spoke up. The severance packages you mentioned, they're real? Completely. Marco lowered his weapon, sliding it back into his jacket. Full year's salary for anyone who wants out. Resources to help you find legitimate employment. Training programs for those who want to transition to our clean operations. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm offering a different path. And what about the families who won't be happy about us going straight? Another man asked. The people we owe favors to? The agreements we have? I'm handling that personally. Marco's voice was firm. Any debts the organization owes, I'm settling. Anyone who has a problem with our transition can take it up with me directly. Vincent was still standing, still watching Marco with cold calculation. And her? He nodded toward Elena. Where does she fit in all this? Marco's hand found the small of Elena's back, pulling her close. Elena fits everywhere. She's the reason I'm doing this, and she'll be part of everything we build going forward. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now. No one moved. Vincent studied them for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, he sat back down. You know what you're risking? The moment word gets out that you're going soft, every enemy we've ever made will come for you. The Castellanos, the Russians, the families we pushed out of territory over the years, they'll see blood in the water. Let them come. Marco's voice was steel. I'm done running this organization through fear. If they want a war, they'll get one. But it'll be the last war the Velero name fights. You really believe you can do this? Vincent's question wasn't mocking anymore. It sounded almost genuine. I have to believe it, Marco said quietly, because the alternative is becoming exactly what my father was. And I'd rather die than do that. The words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. Elena felt the shift in the room, saw the moment when calculation gave way to something else. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. I'm in, the younger man who'd asked about severance said. I never wanted this life anyway. If you're offering a way out, I'll take it. One by one, others started nodding. Not everyone. Elena counted 3 men who remained stone-faced, clearly unconvinced. But it was more than she'd expected, more than they'd probably had any right to hope for. Vincent was the last to speak. You're making a mistake, but it's your mistake to make. He stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll stay. For now. But the first time this new path of yours puts my family at risk, I'm out, and I won't be quiet about it. Fair enough. Marco extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Vincent shook it. The meeting ended with careful logistics, timelines for shutting down operations, procedures for severance, plans for the press statement. By the time the last man filed out, it was past 10. 2 hours until Vivian's deadline. Elena sagged against the table once they were alone, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. Marco was there immediately, his arms coming around her, holding her steady. You were incredible, he murmured against her hair. Standing there, facing them down. You didn't flinch. I was terrified, Elena admitted. When Vincent went for his gun, I know. Marco's arms tightened. But you didn't show it. You stood your ground. Elena pulled back to look at him. What now? The press statement? The press statement. Marco checked his watch. I have a contact at the Times. If I send it now, it'll run in the morning edition, online within the hour. And Vivian? Gets nothing, no leverage, no satisfaction, no revenge. Marco's smile was grim. By the time she realizes what we've done, it'll be too late to stop it. They moved back to the study, where Marco drafted the statement with Elena reading over his shoulder, offering suggestions, helping him find the balance between transparency and self-preservation. It was a masterwork of careful confession, admitting to past crimes while emphasizing the voluntary nature of the disclosure, announcing the restructure while making it clear this wasn't a response to investigation, but a choice. At 11:15, Marco hit send. Done, he said quietly. No going back now. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Time's almost up, Miss Moreau. I hope you've made your choice. Elena showed Marco the message. His jaw tightened, but he pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. I'm sending her the link to the press statement. Let her read about her leverage disappearing in real time. He sent it, and they waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Then Elena's phone exploded with an incoming call. Vivian's number. Elena looked at Marco, who nodded. She answered, putting it on speaker. You stupid, naive little girl. Vivian's voice was pure venom. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've made a choice, Elena said, her voice steady. The same choice my father made, to build something better, instead of perpetuating cycles of violence. You've signed your death warrant. Vivian's laugh was harsh. You think going public protects you? All you've done is paint a target on both your backs. Every family who's ever had a grudge against the Velaros will see this as weakness. They'll come for you. Let them try. Marco's voice was cold. I'm ready. You won't survive the month. Vivian's certainty was chilling. But that's fine. I can wait. I've waited 3 years already. What's a few more weeks before I watch you both burn? The line went dead. Elena set down the phone with shaking hands. The threat was real, immediate, and terrifying. They'd made their choice, set their plan in motion, but Vivian was right about one thing. Going public didn't eliminate the danger. It might even increase it. She's going to come for us, Elena whispered. I know. Marco pulled her into his arms. But we're going to be ready, and we're not alone anymore. As if on cue, his phone rang. Vincent Russo. Just saw the press release, Vincent said without preamble. It's bold, possibly suicidal. But I'll give you this. It takes balls to burn down your own empire. I appreciate the vote of confidence, Marco said dryly. Here's the thing. Word's already spreading through the families. And you're right. They're seeing blood in the water. But some of us remember what it was like before your father took power. Remember the chaos, the constant war. There are people who'd rather have stability, even if it means less profit. What are you saying, Vincent? I'm saying you're not as alone as Vivian Castellano thinks you are. Some of the old guard, we're tired. We've been looking for an exit strategy for years. You just handed us one. A pause. Watch your back, Marco, but know that you've got people watching it with you. When they hung up, Elena felt something shift, hope, maybe, or just the smallest easing of the crushing weight on her chest. We might actually survive this, she said. We're going to do more than survive. Marco's voice was fierce. We're going to win. And then we're going to build something that actually matters. The press statement went live at 11:45. By midnight, Elena's phone was flooded with messages. Sophie calling frantically from the airport. Friends from college asking if the Elena Moreau in the article was really her. Numbers she didn't recognize demanding comment. Marco's phone was worse. Journalists, federal investigators, business partners, everyone wanting a piece of the story. They ignored them all, sitting together in Marco's study as the story spread across the internet like wildfire. The headlines were sensational. Crime family heir comes clean. Velaro empire collapses from within. Mafia redemption or clever PR stunt. But beneath the sensationalism, the core message was clear. Marco Velaro was choosing transparency, choosing change, and the world was watching to see if he could actually pull it off. At 12:30, there was a knock on the door. Marco's security had tripled since the meeting, and Elena heard low voices conferring before the study door opened. Thomas Reeves stood there, looking far too alert for the late hour. I saw the news, he said simply. I thought you might need legal representation. The federal investigators will be here by morning. Marco stood, extending his hand. I'd appreciate that. Reeves settled into a chair, pulling out a legal pad. Walk me through everything. I need to know exactly what you've disclosed, what you've held back, and what's going to come back to bite us when the investigations start. For the next 2 hours, they worked. Reeves asked pointed questions, Marco provided detailed answers, and Elena watched the framework of their defense take shape. It wasn't about denial. It was about controlling the narrative, about making sure the transformation they were attempting looked genuine rather than opportunistic. At 3 in the morning, Reeves finally closed his legal pad. It's risky, but it might work. The key is going to be demonstrating genuine change, not just public relations. You'll need to cooperate fully with any investigations, make restitution where possible, and show concrete steps toward legitimate operations. We're prepared to do all of that, Marco said. Good. Reeves stood, gathering his materials. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be hell. After he left, Elena and Marco sat in exhausted silence. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind bone-deep weariness and the crushing awareness of what they'd set in motion. Come to bed, Marco said quietly, pulling Elena to her feet. Whatever happens tomorrow, we need to be rested for it. But sleep didn't come easily. Elena lay in Marco's arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the tension in his body that mirrored her own. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime rhythms, unaware that in this brownstone, 2 people had just gambled everything on the possibility of redemption. Marco, Elena's voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah? No matter what happens, I don't regret this. Choosing you, choosing us. His arms tightened around her. Even if it all falls apart. Even then. Elena lifted her head to look at him, seeing his face in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Because at least we tried. At least we chose something better. Marco's kiss was gentle, almost reverent. I love you. I don't think I've said that clearly enough, but I do. More than I thought I was capable of. I love you too. The confession felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating, which is probably insane considering we've known each other for less than 2 weeks. Definitely insane. Marco's laugh was soft. But I'll take it. They finally drifted off sometime before dawn, wrapped around each other, holding tight against whatever storm was coming. Elena woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She found Marco in the kitchen, already dressed, his phone pressed to his ear while he managed 3 different conversations via text simultaneously. The TV was on, showing a news anchor discussing the Velaro press release with legal analysts debating whether Marco would face charges. Federal investigators want to meet this afternoon, Marco said when he hung up. Thomas is coordinating. There's also a stockholder meeting for the legitimate businesses, press calling for interviews, and approximately 700 emails demanding responses. Elena poured herself coffee, her hands remarkably steady. Where do we start? We start by having breakfast. Marco pulled out eggs and bread, moving with the same competent efficiency he'd shown that first night cooking dinner. Because we're going to need our strength. They ate in relative silence, watching the news coverage, processing the reality that their lives had been irrevocably changed overnight. Elena's phone rang, Sophie calling for the 5th time. I have to take this, Elena said. She's going to murder me if I don't. Marco nodded, and Elena stepped into the living room. Please tell me, Sophie's voice was tight with worry, that you're somewhere safe and not lying dead in a ditch because you decided to blow up a crime family. I'm safe. I'm at Marco's. The same Marco who just confessed to running criminal operations? That Marco? Sophie's, no, Elena. You don't get to Sophie me. You just made yourself the most visible target in the entire criminal underworld. Every psychopath with a grudge against the Velaros is going to come looking for you. I know the risks. Do you? Really? Sophie's voice cracked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've fallen for some guy and let him drag you into a war you can't win. Elena took a breath, forcing herself to stay calm. He didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. I chose him. And I chose to try to build something better instead of just burning everything down. Silence on the other end of the line. You really love him, Sophie finally said. Don't you? Yeah. Elena's voice softened. I really do. Sophie sighed, long and frustrated. Then I guess I'm stuck supporting your terrible life choices. But I swear, Elena, if you get yourself killed, I'm going to be so mad at you. Fair enough. Elena smiled despite everything. When do you land? 2 hours. I'm coming straight to you. Text me the address. After they hung up, Elena returned to the kitchen to find Marco staring at his laptop, his expression grim. What's wrong? Vivian just released her own statement. Marco turned the screen toward her. She's positioning herself as a victim of Villaro aggression, claiming my family destroyed hers unjustly. She's calling for a federal investigation into whether my confession is comprehensive or if I'm hiding worse crimes. Elena read the statement, her stomach sinking. Vivian was good. She'd twisted the narrative just enough to cast doubt on Marco's motives without directly accusing him of lying. She's trying to make you look like you're only admitting to what you can't hide, Elena said slowly. Which will make the investigators dig deeper, look harder. Marco's jaw was tight. Smart. She can't stop us from going legitimate, but she can make the process as painful as possible. Elena's phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text message. You should have taken my offer. Now you'll learn why mercy is weakness. V. She showed Marco, who immediately made a call to his security team. I want a full protective detail on Elena, 24/7, no exceptions. Marco, I can't live like that. You can, and you will. His voice was firm. Vivian just declared war, and I won't lose you because I underestimated her. The rest of the day blurred into a series of meetings, interviews, and legal consultations. Federal investigators arrived at 4, armed with questions and subpoenas. Thomas Reeves guided them through, Marco answering every question with careful honesty, providing documentation to support his claims. By evening, they'd surrendered enough evidence to keep prosecutors busy for months. But they'd also demonstrated cooperation, transparency, a genuine attempt at transformation that made it harder to paint Marco as just another criminal trying to evade justice. Sophie arrived at 7, taking one look at Elena and pulling her into a fierce hug. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. Elena pulled back. But I'm okay. Really? Sophie's eyes went to Marco, assessing. So you're the guy who convinced my best friend to throw her entire life into chaos. I am, Marco said simply, and I'm sorry for the danger I've brought into her life. But I'm not sorry for loving her. Sophie studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but if you get her killed, I'm haunting you. Fair enough. The evening settled into something almost normal. Sophie demanding to hear the entire story, Marco and Elena tag-teaming the explanation, the three of them eating takeout while the news played their story on an endless loop. For a few hours, it almost felt like maybe they could survive this. Then, at 11 p.m., Marco's phone rang. Vincent Russo. We have a problem. Marco put it on speaker. Talk to me. The Russian families are making moves. They've got word that you're transitioning out of protection operations, and they're moving into your territory. They hit 2 of our collection sites tonight. Our guys backed down per your orders, but Marco, they're not going to stop. They smell weakness. Marco's expression went hard. Casualties? 3 injured, no deaths, but it's only a matter of time. Pull everyone back. Double security on civilians working our legitimate operations. I don't want anyone dying over territory we're giving up anyway. Marco, if we keep retreating, we're going to lose everything. Then we lose everything. Marco's voice was final. I meant what I said, Vincent. No more violence. Let them have the territory. We're building something different. He hung up to find Elena and Sophie staring at him. That's going to keep happening, Elena said quietly. Isn't it? Every family we've had dealings with is going to test how far they can go. Yes. Marco didn't sugarcoat it. This is the cost of changing. We're vulnerable until the transition is complete. Until we're operating purely in legitimate space where the normal rules of law protect us. And if someone gets killed before then? Sophie's question was blunt. Marco's expression was bleak. Then I live with that. Add it to the list of sins I'm trying to atone for. The weight of his words settled over the room. This wasn't a clean transformation. It wasn't a simple story of redemption. It was messy and dangerous, and people were going to get hurt. But they'd chosen this path, and there was no turning back now. The attacks continued for 3 weeks. Not constant, not overwhelming, but steady enough to keep everyone on edge. The Russians pushed into former Villaro territory, the remnants of smaller families tested boundaries, and through it all, Marco held firm to his decision. No retaliation, no violence, just strategic withdrawal from the criminal operations they'd publicly abandoned. Elena watched him carry the weight of it, saw the toll it took every time Vincent called with news of another incursion, another business damaged, another person hurt. He'd come home late those nights, exhaustion written into every line of his body, and she'd hold him while he wrestled with the cost of transformation. 3 more injured tonight, he said one evening in early December, his voice hollow. One of them is a kid, 19 years old, working security because his father worked for mine. He's in the hospital with a broken jaw and a concussion because I decided to go legitimate. Elena pulled his face to look at her. He's in the hospital because criminals chose violence, not because you chose peace. Feels like the same thing. It's not. Her voice was firm. You're building something better. That has costs. But the alternative, staying in that world, perpetuating the cycle, that has costs too. You just don't see those bodies because they're buried in history. Marco closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. How do you stay so certain? Because I've seen who you really are, and that person is worth fighting for. The federal investigation progressed slowly but steadily. Prosecutors built their case, interviewing former associates, examining the documentation Marco had provided, trying to determine what charges could stick. Thomas Reeves navigated it all with practiced skill, negotiating immunity for cooperation, demonstrating the genuineness of the organizational restructure, building a defense that acknowledged past crimes while emphasizing future transformation. They're going to offer a deal, Reeves told them in mid-December. Guilty plea to conspiracy and money laundering. 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. In exchange, you cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into other organizations. Elena felt Marco tense beside her. 5 years. It's better than the 20 you'd face at trial. And with good behavior, you'd likely serve 2, maybe 3. Reeves's voice was gentle. It's the best deal we're going to get, Marco. Take it. They sat in silence after Reeves left. 5 years. Even with parole, it meant years of Marco's life lost to prison, years of them separated, years of building their future on hold. You don't have to take it, Elena finally said. We could fight, go to trial. And risk losing everything? Marco shook his head. No. If this is the price of transformation, I'll pay it. I've done worse things for worse reasons. Elena's throat closed. I'll wait for you. Marco pulled her into his lap, holding her so tight it almost hurt. You shouldn't have to. You should find someone clean, someone who doesn't come with all this baggage. Stop! Elena's voice was fierce. I chose you. I choose you. Prison doesn't change that. Elena? No. She pulled back to look at him, letting him see everything she felt. You think I'm going to walk away now? After everything? You're stuck with me, Marco Velaro, for better or worse, and right now it's worse. But it won't always be. Marco's kiss was desperate, grateful, tinged with the fear of what was coming. They made love that night with an intensity born of impending separation, mapping each other's bodies like they were memorizing geography, storing up moments to sustain them through the long darkness ahead. The deal was signed 2 days before Christmas. Marco would surrender himself to federal custody on January 15th, giving them 1 month to finalize the business transitions, to prepare for his absence, to steal whatever time they could before the consequences of his past caught up with him. Elena threw herself into helping with the transition. The legitimate businesses needed restructuring, new leadership, legal frameworks that could sustain them without Marco's direct control. Vincent Russo stepped up, surprisingly effective at managing the clean operations, his years of experience channeled into something that didn't require violence. Never thought I'd be running restaurants and construction companies, Vincent told Elena one afternoon, reviewing contracts in Marco's study. But it's actually kind of nice, solving problems without breaking kneecaps. Elena smiled. My father would have appreciated the irony. Vincent looked at her, something soft in his usually hard expression. Joseph was a good man. He tried to save us all in his own way. I'm glad his daughter is finishing what he started. Christmas came quiet and intimate. Just Elena, Marco, and Sophie, who temporarily moved into Elena's apartment to keep it occupied while Elena stayed at the brownstone. They cooked dinner together, exchanged small gifts, pretended for one evening that their lives were normal. But normal was a luxury they couldn't afford. On New Year's Eve, Vivian Castellano made her move. Elena was at the bar, doing inventory for the first time in weeks, trying to reclaim some piece of her old life. Sophie was with her, helping count bottles and making sarcastic comments about Elena's organizational system. Marco was at a final meeting with his lawyers, hammering out the last details of the plea agreement. The first sign of trouble was the front door opening after closing time. Elena looked up from the spreadsheet to see Vivian walk in, flanked by two men Elena didn't recognize. Everything in her body went cold. "We're closed," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "I know." Vivian's smile was sharp. "I wanted privacy for our conversation." Sophie moved closer to Elena. "Whatever you want, you need to leave, now." Vivian's eyes flicked to Sophie dismissively before returning to Elena. "I want what I've always wanted. Justice, revenge, the complete destruction of everything Marco Villaro loves." Her gaze was cold. "Starting with you." Elena's hand moved toward her phone, but one of Vivian's men was faster, producing a gun and training it on Sophie. "Don't." Vivian's voice was soft. "You're going to come with me quietly. Your friend stays here, unharmed, as long as you cooperate. Try to run, try to call for help, and she dies. Understand?" Elena's mind raced. Marco's security was outside, but they were watching the front entrance, not expecting someone to walk in through the door like a normal customer. She could scream, but the gun was already on Sophie, and Vivian's finger was too close to the trigger. "Elena, don't—" Sophie started, but Vivian's other guard moved behind her, pressing a gun to the back of her head. "Shut up!" Vivian's attention never left Elena. "You have 5 seconds to decide. Come peacefully or watch your friend die." Every survival instinct Elena had screamed at her to refuse, to fight, to call for Marco. But Sophie's terrified eyes and the cold certainty in Vivian's expression made the choice for her. "Okay." Elena raised her hands slowly. "I'll come. Just don't hurt her." "Smart girl." Vivian gestured toward the back door. "Move." Elena walked on trembling legs, past Sophie, past the bar that had been her sanctuary, toward whatever fate Vivian had planned. At the door, she looked back one last time. "Tell Marco I'm sorry," she said to Sophie. She'll tell him nothing until we're long gone." Vivian shoved Elena through the door into the alley, where a black SUV waited. "Get in." Elena climbed into the vehicle, Vivian sliding in beside her. The door slammed shut, and the SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the bar and Sophie and any chance of rescue behind. They drove in silence through the city, heading toward the industrial district where warehouses hunched against the winter sky like sleeping giants. Elena's mind worked frantically, trying to find an angle, a way out, anything that didn't end with her body dumped in the river. "You know he'll come for me," Elena said finally. "Marco. He'll tear this city apart to find me. I'm counting on it." Vivian's smile was vicious. "That's the whole point. I want him to come. I want him to find you, and I want him to watch you die, knowing it's his fault. Killing me won't change what he did, won't bring your family back. No, but it'll make him suffer, and right now, that's enough." Vivian leaned closer. "You should have taken my offer when you had the chance, destroyed him cleanly, walked away. Instead, you chose love. How tragically predictable." The SUV pulled into an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one heard the screams. Elena was hauled out roughly, dragged through a rusted door into a cavernous space lit by a few bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the space was a chair. Metal, bolted to the floor. Elena's breath came in short gasps as she was forced into it, her wrists zip-tied to the arms. Vivian stood in front of her, checking her phone with casual efficiency. "I've sent Marco your location. He should be here in—" She checked the time. 20 minutes or so, depending on traffic." "What's the point of this?" Elena forced herself to sound calm. "You kill me. Marco kills you. Nobody wins." "Maybe." Vivian pocketed her phone. "Or maybe I kill you. He tries to kill me, and my people kill him. Either way, the Villaro line ends tonight. and I can finally move on. Elena tested the zip ties, but they were industrial strength, cutting into her skin. She was trapped, helpless, exactly where Vivian wanted her. The minutes crawled by like hours. Vivian paced, checking her phone while her guard stood at the exits. Elena tried to think, to plan, to find any possible escape route, but there was nothing. She was completely at Vivian's mercy, and Vivian had no mercy left. Headlights swept through the broken windows, car doors slammed. Elena's heart hammered as she recognized Marco's voice outside, shouting her name. "Right on time," Vivian murmured. She pulled out a handgun, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "Let him in." The warehouse door crashed open. Marco stood silhouetted against the night, Vincent and 3 other men behind him. His eyes found Elena immediately, and the anguish in his expression made her chest crack open. "Let her go, Vivian." Marco's voice was deadly calm. "This is between us. Everything has always been between us." Vivian moved behind Elena's chair, pressing the gun to the back of her head. "Your father destroyed mine, killed my family, scattered us to the winds, and you finished the job, dismantled what little we had left. So yes, Marco, this is between us, and she's the price you pay. Please." The word was torn from Marco's throat. "Take me instead. Kill me if you need revenge that badly, but let Elena go. She's innocent in all of this." "No one is innocent." Vivian's finger moved to the trigger. "That's what I learned when your father killed mine. There are no innocents, only people who haven't paid their debts yet." Elena met Marco's eyes across the warehouse, seeing the desperation there, the helpless rage. She wanted to tell him it was okay, that she didn't blame him, that loving him had been worth this, but the words caught in her throat. Then Sophie's voice cut through the tension. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Everything happened at once. The warehouse flooded with armed agents, laser sights painting red dots across everyone's chest. Vivian's gun pressed harder against Elena's head for one terrifying moment, and then Vincent's shot rang out, precise and professional, hitting Vivian's shoulder. The gun clattered to the floor. Vivian screamed, clutching her shoulder as agents swarmed her. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. Someone was cutting the zip ties, and then Marco was there, pulling her from the chair, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. You're okay, I've got you." Elena clung to him, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "How? The FBI?" "Sophie called them the second Vivian took you." Marco's voice was rough with emotion. "She gave them everything. Your location, Vivian's threats, proof of kidnapping and attempted murder. Thomas had been coordinating with them already, and they were ready to move." Elena looked past him to see Sophie standing with one of the agents, her face pale but determined. Their eyes met, and Sophie gave a shaky smile. "Told you I'd have your back," Sophie called out. Vivian was on her knees now, hands cuffed behind her back, blood seeping through her designer blouse. Her eyes found Marco, blazing with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think arresting me ends anything? There are others who remember, others who want you dead." "Then they can get in line." Marco's voice was cold. "But you're done, Vivian. The FBI has everything they need to charge you with kidnapping, attempted murder, and about a dozen other felonies. You're going away for a very long time." As the agents dragged Vivian toward a waiting vehicle, Elena finally let herself collapse against Marco, letting the terror and adrenaline drain out of her in shaking sobs. He held her through it, whispering promises and apologies, his own body trembling with the aftermath of fear. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better, should have seen this coming." "Stop." Elena pulled back to look at him. "You did protect me. You and Sophie and Vincent. You saved me." "We almost didn't." Marco's voice broke. "If Vivian had pulled that trigger, but she didn't." Elena framed his face with her hands. "I'm here. I'm alive. We're alive, and Vivian can't hurt us anymore." The federal agents wanted statements, of course. They spent the next several hours at the FBI field office, recounting the kidnapping, Vivian's threats, the rescue. The agent in charge, a no-nonsense woman named Morrison, listened with sharp attention. "Miss Castellano just made our job a lot easier," Morrison said when they finished. Between this and Mr. Villaro's cooperation on the other investigations, we're dismantling a significant portion of organized crime in this city. What happens to her? Elena asked. Prison, federal facility. With her family connections destroyed and her own crimes documented, she's looking at 25 to life. Morrison's expression was grim. She won't be bothering you again. It was nearly dawn when they finally left the FBI building. Sophie was waiting in the lobby, having given her own statement hours ago. She pulled Elena into a fierce hug. Don't ever scare me like that again. I'll try not to. Elena held her tight. Thank you. For everything. You saved my life. That's what best friends do. Sophie pulled back, wiping her eyes. But seriously, can we please have some boring months now? I'm exhausted from all this drama. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet. With Vivian in custody and the federal investigations winding down, the attacks on Marco's operations ceased. Other families, seeing the FBI's crackdown, backed off, focusing on their own territories rather than testing the Villaro's weakened position. Marco's sentencing hearing came in mid-January. Elena sat in the courtroom, Sophie on one side and Vincent on the other, as the judge reviewed the plea agreement. Thomas Reeves made an impassioned case for leniency, highlighting Marco's cooperation, the genuine organizational transformation, the lives saved by his decision to go legitimate. The prosecutor pushed back, detailing the years of criminal operations, the money laundered, the violence enabled. Back and forth they went, painting competing pictures of the same man, monster or redeemed sinner, criminal or transformer. In the end, the judge split the difference. Mr. Villaro, you've committed serious crimes that have caused real harm. The court acknowledges your cooperation and the steps you've taken toward making restitution. However, consequences must be enforced. I'm sentencing you to 4 years in federal prison with eligibility for parole after 2 years served. Additionally, you'll face 5 years of supervised release upon completion of your sentence. 4 years. Elena's heart sank even as relief washed through her. It could have been so much worse, but 4 years still felt like an eternity. Marco turned to look at her, and she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes. Grief at the separation, relief that it wasn't life, determination to survive this and build their future on the other side. They were given 2 weeks before he had to surrender to federal custody. 2 weeks to finalize everything, to say goodbye, to prepare for the long separation. Elena moved through those days in a daze, helping Marco tie up loose ends, spending every possible moment together, trying to memorize the feel of his hands, the sound of his voice, the way he looked at her like she was his entire world. The night before he had to surrender, they lay tangled together in his bed, neither sleeping, just holding each other. I'm going to write you, Marco said quietly. Every day. And you'll visit, right? As often as they allow? Every visiting day. Elena's voice was fierce. And I'll keep the businesses running. I'll make sure everything you built stays strong until you come back. You don't have to. I want to. She lifted her head to look at him. This is our future, Marco. Not just yours. I'm invested now. In the businesses, in the transformation, in you. I'm not going anywhere. Marco's kiss was tender, almost reverent. I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, I don't care about deserve. Elena settled back against his chest. I care about love and choice and building something that matters. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. Elena smiled against his skin. Terror means it's real. They made love one last time as free people, slow and sweet and tinged with desperate sorrow. And when dawn came, they held each other and cried, grieving the months ahead while somehow still holding on to hope. Thomas Reeves drove them to the federal facility. Elena held Marco's hand the entire way, neither speaking, the weight of goodbye pressing down on them. At the entrance, Marco turned to face her one last time. 2 years, he said, maybe less with good behavior. We can survive 2 years. We can survive anything. Elena pulled him down for a final kiss, pouring everything she felt into it, love and promise and unshakable faith in their future. When they finally pulled apart, Marco pressed something into her hand. A key. The brownstone is yours. Everything I have is yours. Build our life, Elena. I'll be home before you know it." Then he was walking away toward the guards and the gates and the beginning of his sentence. Elena watched until he disappeared inside, the key clutched so tight in her hand it left marks. Sophie appeared at her elbow, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Come on, let's go home." The months that followed were harder than Elena had imagined. The business kept her busy. She discovered she had a knack for management, for negotiating contracts, for building relationships with legitimate partners who saw the value in the Villaro transformation. Vincent became an unlikely ally and friend, teaching her the ins and outs of the operations, protecting her from the few remaining families who thought a woman couldn't hold power. She visited Marco every week, sitting across from him in the prison visiting room, sharing news about the businesses, about Sophie's new relationship, about the small victories and setbacks of daily life. They talked about the future, making plans for when he was released, dreaming of the life they'd build together. And every night, she slept in his bed in the brownstone, reading his daily letters, writing her own, counting down the days until he could come home. 8 months into his sentence, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The realization hit her like a freight train as she sat in her doctor's office, staring at the positive test result. She and Marco had been careful, mostly, but that last night, grief and desperation had made them careless. She was carrying his child. Elena told Sophie first, who reacted with a complicated mix of joy and concern. "Are you okay with this? Because if you're not—" "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "But I want this piece of him with me while he's gone, want our family." Telling Marco was harder. She waited until her next visit, until they were sitting across from each other in the sterile visiting room, and then she simply said it. "I'm pregnant. 3 months. Marco's expression went through a dozen emotions in seconds: shock, joy, fear, wonder. His hand pressed against the glass partition between them, and Elena matched it with her own, wishing desperately she could actually feel his touch. "A baby." His voice was rough with emotion. "We're having a baby. I know you're going to miss so much." "Hey," Marco's interruption was gentle. "I'm going to miss the pregnancy, the birth, the first few months. But I'll be there for everything after. First words, first steps, first everything that matters. This is a gift, Elena. The greatest gift you could give me." Elena's tears fell freely. "I'm scared of doing this alone." "You're not alone. You have Sophie, Vincent, Thomas. You have an entire network of people who love you and will help you." Marco's smile was soft. "And you have me. Even behind these walls, you have me. Always." The pregnancy gave Elena new purpose. She threw herself into preparing, turning one of the brownstone spare bedrooms into a nursery, reading every book on parenting she could find, working with her doctor to ensure the healthiest pregnancy possible. The legitimate businesses thrived under her management. She discovered a passion for the work, for building something sustainable and ethical, for proving that transformation was possible. By the time she was 6 months pregnant, the Villaro Empire had been completely separated from its criminal roots, operating entirely in legal frameworks that could sustain themselves for generations. Vincent stepped into a formal leadership role, working alongside Elena to manage the day-to-day operations. He softened over those months, the violence in him gradually replaced by something almost grandfatherly, especially once he learned about the baby. "Boss would be proud," Vincent told her one afternoon, reviewing quarterly earnings that showed continued growth. "You've built something he only dreamed of." Elena's daughter was born on a cold February morning, almost a year to the day after Marco had surrendered to custody. Sophie was there, holding Elena's hand through the labor, coaching her breathing, celebrating when the baby finally emerged with a fierce, healthy cry. "She's perfect," Sophie breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Elena, she's absolutely perfect." They named her Rose, after Marco's grandmother, the one who told him it was never too late to choose differently. Elena held her daughter and cried, overwhelmed by love and joy and the bittersweet grief that Marco wasn't there to share this moment. But 2 days later, he got to meet his daughter through the prison's video visitation system. Elena held Rose up to the camera, and Marco's face on the screen crumpled with emotion. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." She has your eyes. Elena adjusted the baby so Marco could see her better. And she's strong, stubborn, already demanding everything on her own schedule. Marco laughed, the sound thick with tears. Definitely my daughter, then. They talked for the full hour aloud, Marco asking 100 questions about the birth, about Rose's health, about how Elena was feeling. And when the call ended, Elena sat in the hospital room holding their daughter, feeling less alone than she had in months. The second year of Marco's sentence was both easier and harder. Easier because Elena had found her rhythm, managing the businesses, raising Rose, building a life that felt full and purposeful. Harder because the separation felt more acute now, watching their daughter grow without her father, marking milestones he should have been there for. But they survived. Elena visited every week, bringing Rose when she was old enough, letting Marco see his daughter through bulletproof glass. They wrote letters constantly, sharing photos and stories, keeping each other anchored through the distance. And slowly, impossibly, the time passed. Marco's parole hearing came 18 months into his sentence, 6 months earlier than expected due to good behavior and continued cooperation with federal investigations. Elena sat in the hearing room, Rose sleeping against her shoulder, while the parole board reviewed Marco's case. They asked hard questions about his crimes, his transformation, his plans for the future. Marco answered with the same careful honesty he'd shown throughout the process, acknowledging his past while demonstrating genuine change. "If released, what are your plans?" one board member asked. Marco's eyes found Elena across the room. "To build a life with my family. To continue the work I started, transforming my businesses into something legitimate and sustainable. To be the father my daughter deserves and the partner Elena has earned." The board deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the chairwoman's expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Villaro, this board has reviewed your case thoroughly. Your cooperation with federal authorities has been exemplary, and the transformation of your business operations demonstrates genuine commitment to change. However, we must balance this against the serious nature of your original crimes." Elena held her breath. After careful consideration, this board has decided to grant parole, effective in 30 days, with strict conditions. You will remain on supervised release for the duration of your original sentence, submit to regular check-ins with your parole officer, and continue cooperating with any ongoing investigations. Violation of any of these conditions will result in immediate return to custody. Do you understand? "I understand." Marco's voice was steady, but Elena could see his hands shaking. "Thank you." The 30 days crawled by in agonizing slowness. Elena prepared the brownstone, making sure everything was ready for Marco's return. Sophie helped, bringing meals and watching Rose and providing the kind of steady support that had kept Elena sane through all of this. "You did it," Sophie said the night before Marco's release. "You held everything together, raised a baby, built a legitimate empire, and stayed completely loyal to a man in prison. You're kind of amazing, you know that?" Elena looked at Rose sleeping in her bassinet, at the home she'd built, at the life she'd created from the ashes of violence and grief. "I just did what needed doing." That's what makes it amazing. The day of Marco's release, Elena arrived at the facility 2 hours early. She wore a simple dress, her hair down the way Marco liked it, Rose bundled in a soft pink outfit. They waited in the parking lot, Elena's heart hammering, until finally the doors opened, and Marco walked out. He looked different, thinner, harder, with new lines around his eyes. But when he saw Elena and Rose, his entire face transformed. Joy and relief and love so fierce it made Elena's chest ache. She met him halfway, Rose held carefully between them, and when Marco's arms finally closed around them both, Elena felt something inside her settle. Complete. Whole. "You're home," she whispered against his shoulder. "I'm home." Marco pulled back just enough to look at his daughter, really look at her, for the first time without glass between them. "Hi, sweet girl. I'm your daddy." Rose, 7 months old and fearless, reached out and grabbed Marco's nose, making him laugh, a sound so pure and joyful that Elena started crying. "She's perfect," Marco said, his own voice thick with tears. "You're both perfect." They went home together, the three of them, to the brownstone that had weathered everything. Marco walked through rooms that were familiar but changed, seeing the life Elena had built in his absence. The nursery decorated with care, the office where she managed the businesses, the subtle touches that made the house a home. That night, after Rose was asleep, they lay in bed together for the first time in 18 months. Marco held Elena like she might disappear, his hands relearning the geography of her body, his voice breaking as he told her everything he'd thought about during the long nights in prison. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Everything you built, everything you accomplished. Elena, you're incredible." "We built it together." Elena's fingers traced the new scars on his knuckles, evidence of the violence he'd faced inside. "Your vision, my execution, our future." "Our future." Marco repeated the words like a vow. "I'm never taking another day with you for granted, with either of you." The months that followed were an adjustment. Marco had to navigate parole requirements, rebuild relationships with business partners, learn how to be a father to a daughter who was growing and changing every day. There were hard moments, nights when prison nightmares woke him, days when the weight of his supervised release felt suffocating, times when the gap between who he'd been and who he was trying to become felt impossible to bridge. But there were more good moments. Rose's first steps, taken while holding her father's hands, family dinners with Sophie and Vincent, the unlikely family they'd created, board meetings where Marco and Elena presented as partners, proving that the Velaro transformation was complete and sustainable. 1 year after Marco's release, they stood in the same church where his father's funeral had been held, facing each other in front of Sophie, Vincent, Thomas Reeves, and a small gathering of people who'd become family through this journey. "I never thought I'd have this," Marco said, his voice steady as he held Elena's hands. "A life built on honesty instead of secrets. A family I don't have to protect through violence. A future that doesn't require becoming a monster." "You were never a monster," Elena said softly. "You were just trapped in a monster's world. We both were. But we chose differently. We chose each other. We chose love and transformation and the hard work of becoming better." The officiant smiled. "I think that's a better vow than anything I could write. Marco, Elena, you've already committed to each other through the hardest trials. This ceremony is simply making official what your actions have proven, that you're partners in every sense of the word." They exchanged simple rings, kissed while their small congregation cheered, and walked out into the sunlight as husband and wife. Rose toddled between them, holding both their hands, laughing as they lifted her over puddles. 5 years after the night Elena had first met Marco in her bar, they stood on the terrace of the brownstone, watching the sunset paint the city gold. Rose was asleep inside, worn out from her 3rd birthday party. The businesses were thriving, completely legitimate, employing hundreds of people in ethical operations. Marco's parole had ended 6 months ago, making him finally fully free. "Do you ever think about that night?" Elena asked, leaning against the railing. "When you showed up at my bar with your guards and your guilt?" "Every day." Marco's arm came around her waist. "I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that you'd hate me, how impossible all of this seemed. And now? Now I look at our life and I can barely believe it's real." Marco turned her to face him, his eyes soft with wonder. "We took something broken and violent, and we transformed it into this, into family and purpose and actual happiness." Elena smiled. "My father would have loved this, seeing what we built from what he started. He'd be so proud of you." Marco's voice was certain. "Of the woman you became. The mother, the businesswoman, the partner. You're everything he hoped you'd be." "We're everything he hoped we'd be," Elena corrected. "He believed in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that people could choose to be better. We proved him right." From inside, they heard Rose calling for them, her voice high and sweet. Marco smiled, taking Elena's hand as they headed back into the warmth of their home. "Come on, Mrs. Velaro. Our daughter needs us." Elena followed him inside, into the life they'd built from darkness and loss, and the stubborn insistence that love could transform anything. It hadn't been easy. It had cost them years and pain and the kind of hard choices that left scars. But standing in their home, watching Marco scoop up their daughter while she giggled, seeing the business reports that proved their legitimate empire was thriving, feeling the weight of her wedding ring and the certainty of their future, Elena knew it had been worth every sacrifice. Her father had died so she could truly live. And at last, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and the future she'd built, Elena was living, fully, honestly, completely. Not because it was safe, but because it was real. And real, she'd learned, was worth fighting for.